This is Blue Left, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the underrepresented Democratic voices in Tennessee, working tirelessly to bring progressive change to the volunteer state. Here's your host, Peggy Kingsbury.
That's right. Welcome back to Blue Left, where every voice matters. We're here to talk about a super important topic today with a super important person. As always, we bring you the best guests at Blue Left. Today we're going to be talking about grassroots organizing and vouchers, school vouchers. And I'm so excited to have my guest today, Liv Cook. Liv is coming to us remotely because she is a super busy person right now. Liv is the head public education organizer for Statewide Organizing and Community Empowerment, SOCM, or as we call it, SOCM. And we're going to ask Liz to tell us a little more about SOCM, but I want you to know that she, through this Public School Strong Tennessee campaign, local leaders are trying to build strong grassroots campaign to win the honest, equitable, safe, and fully funded schools their communities deserve. And Liz is right in the middle of that fight and all of that training. We're excited to have you here with us today, Liz. Welcome to Blue Left.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, before we get started on some much more interesting questions, however, this is an important question. Tell us a little bit about what SOCM is and how long it's been around.
Yeah, so SOCM is a 52-year-old organization. We have our roots in the Appalachian coal fields of East Tennessee, where folks were noticing these big coal companies were stripping their communities of resources without giving anything back. Some folks got together, some labor folks, ordinary people came together to launch a campaign to fight back against the coal companies. And that's when SOCM was born back in 1972. Over the years, we've realized that there are a lot of different issues in Tennessee, and we've got the most power when we organize locally. So in the 90s, we had a rebrand for Statewide Organizing for Community Empowerment. We used to be Save Our Cumberland Mountains. And so now we cover a lot of different issues, but our kind of primary issues we zone in on are public education, rights to housing, and community-driven development. So stopping those corporations from coming in and ruining our small town and rural communities.
That is awesome. I love the story, and I love all of the things that SOCM is doing for us. So we've got a special session coming up in Tennessee. And for my listeners out of state, if your state hasn't gone down the we need school voucher route yet, you will. And many states already have, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've learned from those states. But there are some misconceptions out there about school vouchers. They're being called parents' choice, I believe, school choice, which sounds like a wonderful thing, doesn't it? And you know, I mean, I don't blame those who are pushing it for coming up with a slogan that sounds good. That's how things happen. But, you know, when I think about school choice and I think about how it affects real people and real families, I think about it more deeply than just, gosh, every parent has a right to choose how their child is educated, which seems like a fair thing. And you know what? That is true. They certainly do have the right to do that. But, you know, I was driving here today to do this interview, and I was on I-65, and I thought, you know, this whole school choice thing, it's sort of like the tolls that some states are putting in, saying if you pay a little more, you can drive on the better part of the expressway and you can drive faster. Well, okay, that sounds great, but it's not available to everyone. Everyone can't pay a little more. And even if, let's say, the cost to drive in the fast lane and the freshly paved lane and the pothole-free lane was $10,000 a year, but the state was going to give you $7,000, a lot of people don't have the extra $3,000. And so they have to drive in the lanes that really need maintenance. They really need the state money to go to those lanes and keep them up and fix the potholes, etc. They're having to leave for work earlier than everyone else, get home later than everyone else. They're having to bear the brunt of what most normal people have to deal with because a few select wealthy people can take advantage of a government program. And to me, that's sort of like how vouchers work. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions about vouchers, Liv?
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that it's called parent choice, or that it's called educational freedom, or whatever slogan that they are coming up with for whatever they're wanting to push. Um, you know, education savings accounts, vouchers, all these privatization programs. If we go way back to Brown versus Board of Education, that is where vouchers started. They weren't started. It was freedom for who was the question, and it was freedom for white families to choose to not integrate into the public schools. That is the history of vouchers. They are rooted in segregation, and they are rooted in leaving behind the families that they claim to help. And so when we're having this conversation about educational freedom, parent choice, all of these things, like you said, sound good. They sound reasonable. But when you dig deeper into the voucher programs, just like what you were saying, it is benefiting these families that already could afford a private option. For students with disabilities, in order to get a voucher, they would have to give up their federal protections, their rights, and a lot of private schools wouldn't even let them in. In communities like mine, I live in rural East Tennessee, we don't have a lot of private options. And even if we did, most people choose their public schools because that's the center of community life in rural communities. And a lot of these private schools are not going to accept a lot of the people that this legislation is claiming to support. So I think the biggest misconception is that it's parent choice at all. Really, it's choice for the private schools that are getting to pick and choose who they let in.
Excellent. I agree. I agree with all of that. And we know a lot of states, not a lot, but some states have already been down this path. What can we learn in Tennessee about the experience of other states and the voucher programs?
Yeah. So in this legislation that Tennessee is trying to push forward in House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, legislators are trying to put up these guardrails in the legislation. They're saying, okay, well, we'll start with 20,000. We'll make sure the first 10,000 are prioritized for this demographic. We'll make sure it's subject to appropriations. They've got all these different things that they're trying to put, quote, guardrails up. And they're doing that because they're saying, well, Tennessee is going to do it better than these other programs. Where I'd like to point them to is Arizona. Arizona also started with a very small voucher program that has now ballooned up and costed their state $1 billion.
$1 billion.
And this isn't just $1 billion.
Wow.
And it's not just impacting their schools. Schools are closing. There's all the things that are impacting their schools. But now they're talking about how are we going to fund our water supply? Now this voucher program that's benefiting the wealthiest in Arizona, because of this, they're now having to choose, well, which fire departments are we going to close? This is impacting like county level issues. And so I think we can look to Arizona and see the writing on the wall. We can look to Florida that's now spending $4 billion a year on vouchers. Once you open up the can of worms, it's open. There is no closing it.
Right.
And so if we pass this voucher program years down the line, we're going to be reeling from those effects.
I agree. And I also think about a lot of the other ancillary things that will be affected. I mean, obviously, teacher jobs, and then also things like sports programs. And I think some people haven't really thought about that. So, in the community that I live in, it's fairly wealthy, and our sports teams are extremely well funded. Some of their stadiums look like small college stadiums. The marching bands are well outfitted. They've got all the things that you would think. They have a training facility for the athletes. So let's just talk about high school football. That's a big thing around here. It's huge. We start vouchers, and we have a lot of kids leaving the public school. Those things are going to be underfunded. And I just am not sure that a lot of parents have thought that one through. Is that, all of the other extracurricular things that are important, as you said, to community, to the well-being of the community, to the things that pull the community together. Those kind of things could definitely be affected.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about the experience in other states, are the other states using some sort of testing measure to see if children in voucher schools or private schools are actually learning more than public school children?
It depends on the state, but what we have from resources from, I think, Louisiana and Wisconsin is that students that receive vouchers are not outperforming their public school peers. We have that data for Tennessee. We have a pilot voucher program across 3 different counties, and reports just released that all these students across the board, these voucher recipients, performed worse than their public school counterparts. And this data is really important because they're claiming that this voucher program will help lift up, students that are in underserved districts. But it's clearly not the case. So if we already know that it doesn't work, and we've seen this data in other states as well, we see it in our own communities, there is no reason to turn this into a universal program. I think they're jumping the gun a bit with that one.
Oh, I agree. And in any corporation, if you roll out a program to just a few areas of the company, let's say you're a nationwide corporation, and you roll it out to a few states, and you see, well, this isn't really working very well. Corporations will say, okay, let's put the brakes on this thing. This might not be the right thing to do, but for some reason, maybe because of the inefficiencies of government, or maybe just because of pure politics, we're just like forging right ahead when we already know that it really isn't working. And I think the other thing that listeners need to know is the 3 areas of Tennessee where we have the experimental voucher program. What is unique about those 3 counties, Liv?
I think they are urban, predominantly Black and brown communities. And I think that, again, when we talk about the history of vouchers, when we talk about the places that we are willing to make testing grounds for this bad legislation, it is always, always going to hurt Black and brown and working class families the most. We had 5 different direct actions and press conferences just this week calling out the voucher scam. And that was something that was lifted up by our Memphis leaders and parents. Stop making our home the testing ground for this bad policy.
Right. And I'm very pragmatic. So one of the things I do when I hear about new legislation that's supposed to affect a lot of families, I think practically, how does that look for a lot of families? And we have many rural counties in Tennessee that don't have any private schools. And so some people say, well, then don't worry about it. Your county won't be affected by vouchers. However, I also have enough of a background in various things to know that if you roll a program out that involves money, it takes about 10 seconds for someone to figure out how to abuse that program. It just doesn't take long at all. And there will be, and I use air quotes, private schools starting up to take advantage of this voucher money. And they, will not have the same accreditation processes that other schools have. They won't have to follow all of the rules. As you said, they won't have to take all of the students. And I've read our proposed Tennessee legislation, and clearly they will be able to teach a very narrow curriculum that can be religious-based, in fact. And so I wonder, what does that really look like for families? And in rural communities, you may see Miss Mary start a school in the church basement with 12 kids who are learning from a video curriculum. And they're getting that voucher money and calling that a school. And again, I just think people will look for a way to abuse a program as quickly as they can. And I also think about also practically, in many rural counties, there may be the next county over that will have some private schools. But only the wealthier parents can take advantage of that because, first of all, they have to pay the difference. I mean, the vouchers in Tennessee will be $7,000 per student, and that's not even going to touch the tuition at most of our private schools. But you would have to be this sort of family that would have very reliable transportation because these private schools are not going to have bus systems. You would have to be the kind of parent that would be able to have the time to drive the child 30 miles to the next county to get to school every day and pick them up every afternoon. And then if they do any extracurriculars, if those are often offered at these schools, you would have to be able to take time out to do that. So in a practical way, it just isn't for the students that they're telling us it is for. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. And I live in McMinn County, Tennessee, very rural, small town area. We already have our fair share of religious private schools here.
Yeah.
So there's already a market. I think there's already a market here for that. And I think too, something that's really critical when we're thinking about rural communities in particular, the majority of the funding for rural schools is state funding. We don't have the same revenue as bigger cities. We don't have the same wealth as the bigger cities. So we really, really rely on state funding, and our state funding is per pupil. So if we start losing kids to these private programs, whether they're popping up in our county or in the next county over, we're talking about losing teachers, losing the limited programs we do have. I mean, this is and that's the primary employer. That is devastating for rural communities like mine. The voucher legislation is including some kind of hold harmless clause that says, if you lose kids, we'll fund the gap that you lose from 1 year to the next. So really the impact of this bill may not be felt in its first year of rollout, but we start getting to 3-5 years down the line, your local property taxes are going to raise, our school districts are going to close, and we're going to have those that are already suffering the most suffer even more. So yeah, absolutely. This is not serving anybody but the billionaire and private interests that are in the ears of Governor Lee and some of our legislators.
I agree, and I think that's a really important point that you made. They've tried to put a little sugar on the bill by saying, well, we're not going to reduce the funding for your county year over year. But the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, what that means is if a school district, let's just use round numbers, let's say they lose 100 students in year A, well, the $7,000 per student is not going to be withdrawn or withheld from that school system in year number 2 that student is in private school. But in year number 3, it is. Right?
That's my understanding. Yes, that's my understanding as well. But it depends on which legislator you talk to and how much they understand that. There are some legislators that are saying, no, it's in perpetuity. And I'm like, well, you better add that in the bill because that's not what it says.
And if it's in perpetuity, that makes no sense at all, because then what that says is the state of Tennessee is saying, hey, if you want to send your kid to private school, we're going to give you $7,000, and it has no effect anywhere else. Then the bill would just be about where we're getting the money from. But obviously, the money is going to be coming from the schools, and that's why the bill was even written, was to pull that money from the schools. And so they may say that, but I don't think that's genuine. I think they understand. I think they understand the whole point of it is, if the state is paying $7,000 per child, added to the federal money that's received, and the money from the county. So, I think people understand that funding for a school comes from several places. One is the federal government per student, 2 is the state, and 3 is the county. And if you remove that state funding, which in Tennessee they've rounded off as $7,000, then they're saying, okay, a parent, you should have your choice about where your child goes to school. And so what we're going to do in Tennessee is withhold that $7,000 and let you have it so you can spend it at the school of your choice. So clearly that's going to be coming from our public schools. And most of our teachers, let's just say a teacher makes $70,000 a year in Tennessee, which we know is not true, but let's just say, well, how many kids is that?
It's like 10, right?
Yeah. 10 kids take advantage of vouchers. You're talking about one teacher's salary, essentially. And don't think that means, oh, well, then that's okay. There's 10 less kids to teach. No, those 10 kids aren't coming from the same class. They're not coming from the same age group. They're not they're coming from all over one particular school. So in an elementary school, they could be coming from K to 5 for example. And you start losing teachers, then you're going to have more children in each public school classroom and less funding for all of the things, meals, everything. It's just a very problematic thing that they're trying to do. And of course, I have no problem with a child going to private school. I just think that is truly a parent's choice. We already have parent choice. You can send your child wherever you want to go. You can homeschool your child. And as I understand it, the $7,000 can be used for homeschooling as well. Is that correct?
No, so the homeschoolers were actually able to lobby themselves out of this bill. So homeschooling is excluded because homeschool families didn't want the government strings attached. They were, I think last year they were trying to push that this was something they really wanted. And the homeschool community said, no, we pulled our kids out of public schools because we don't want the government overreach. We don't want your voucher. And so they removed them from this legislation.
Okay, well, that's something positive. What is the process if someone said, well, okay, I really love this whole thing and I want to start a school. And we want to start a school that focuses on teaching kids about agriculture, let's say, and we want to teach them to farm and grow vegetables. Is there a regimented process for getting a school started in Tennessee that we can at least think, okay, well, they're going to make them get accredited. They're going to make them adhere to some academic standards?
Yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs for how a private school would get started. I do know that the legislation, I think, says that whatever school is receiving the voucher has to be in function for at least 3 years, I think is what they said. So, we might get a pop-up school that pops up like, oh, we're going to start this year right after vouchers. They likely wouldn't get the vouchers. But if they stay, in action for 3 years, then they could start getting the voucher money. So, a lot of that immediate impact likely wouldn't be felt that first year. But 3 years from now, I think we're really going to see, there's a lot of these schools that have come up that want to take this money.
And I think there is a workaround for them on that too, Liv. I think that some of the schools that are coming in, saying they're going to come in, are actually corporate schools, let's say. And so they've been around for maybe a dozen years, but just in other places. And I think they can use that as saying, oh, we've been around for more than 3 years. We've got classical schools in this place, in this place, in this place. And when we talk about a classical education, again, using a word that makes it sound good, but we may be talking about a type of classical education that uses curricula, I guess, that doesn't tell history as it really is, for example. That says the Civil War was about states' rights, for example. Geography, geology, biology, all of those things are taught from a religious standpoint, which can be very different than what a child would learn in public school. And I think that's problematic. For one thing, I really hope that when kids graduate from school, they have a well-rounded education. And I think it's great if they understand, hey, there are people out here who think that creationism is how the world came about. And then there are people out here who are more scientific and they see it a different way. I think it's great for children to know both of those things. I have a problem with children only knowing one of those things. And the same when we talk about geopolitical issues and how students are taught those. So let me ask you this. What students do you think will be harmed the most from vouchers in Tennessee?
Well, I think that I honestly think that the ones that'll be harmed the most are the ones that it's claiming to benefit. So students in rural communities, working class students. We've got all of these folks that are already wealthy enough to attend private school. In Arizona and their voucher program, 80% of voucher recipients had never attended public school.
So I want everyone to really listen to that. 80% of the recipients had never attended public school anyway.
Yes.
And some people say, but we've been paying school taxes and it's time for us to get some money back. Well, you know what? I don't have any children. I've never had use of public schools for children, but I pay school taxes just like everyone else does. And I don't have a problem with that at all because, as you said, public schools are more than just where children go to a building 5 days a week. It's really the hub of the community in many places. And it's also a huge employer. In some of our rural counties, they're the biggest employer in town. Yes, I'm sorry. So go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think that's exactly on track. And I think the ones that are going to be hurt the most are the ones that it's claiming to represent. Working class students with disabilities, these students in quote failing school districts. Well, who's going to take the voucher? It's likely going to be these wealthier, more high achieving students. And so now you've got that demographic that's leaving the public school system to go to this private school system. The kids that are going to be left behind are going to be the kids that need the most support needs, the kids that don't have the money to, go take the voucher anyway, because it's not going to cover their full tuition. You're going to have maybe less teachers in the building, less resources. And so now you've got your highest need kiddos in a school with drained resources. That is who is going to hurt and who's going to be left behind. And I think our communities are going to hurt. We as a nation believe in public schools because somewhere along the way, we decided that we needed educated people to have a healthy democracy. And so when we undermine and underfund our public schools, we're undermining our democratic process. We're undermining the strength of our communities. And so I think that whether you have kids in school or not, Republican, Democrat, whoever you are, this is going to hurt all of us, but primarily it is going to hurt our working class families. It's going to hurt students with disabilities, and it's going to hurt our rural communities the most.
I agree. And before we talk about what we can all do about this, I want to say that one of the things that strikes me is that I wish our legislators would work as hard to make our public schools everything they should be as they're working to bring vouchers. It is true we have public schools that need upkeep. It is true that we have public schools that are not performing as well as we wish they would. It is true that some of them are using old supplies. It is true that some of our buses need more maintenance. I mean, all of these things are true. It is true, I think our students need better nutrition in school. And they haven't worked hard on that at all. In fact, they've ignored that. They've ignored the plea from public schools to say, hey, we need a little more funding. We need to be able to offer these programs. And, we have students who are coming to us now because of trauma. For example, the opioid epidemic has affected so many students everywhere. And these are kids who are living in tough situations. They've been through tough things. They may have a parent who got some pain medicine for an injury and they became addicted and the entire family fell apart, but yet they're coming to school every week and we just expect them to learn like the next student who isn't suffering from any of those things. And so, we've been asking for years for our legislators to care about our public schools. But the amount of energy, time, and money they're putting into this voucher thing is unbelievable. And I just wish our governor and legislators cared as much about our public schools as they do this money grab, which I always say, Liv, I say, follow the money. This isn't about giving. This isn't about giving parents choice, and it isn't about better educating students. If it was, we would have been trying to do that before. It's about money, and it's about a religious ideology that some people feel we all must comply to. And so, in order to get us all to comply, we need to teach our children this one mainstream Judeo-Christian sort of education from the beginning, and they think that's what's best for every child. So it really isn't about parent choice.
Well, and I think on that point too, on following the money and where this is coming from, I think that is the kicker to all of this. If you ask an ordinary Tennessean, do you support public money going to private schools? They are going to tell you no. The people that are pushing for this are billionaires that are not from Tennessee. The Tennessee Lookout put out a report that these out-of-state billionaire groups poured $4.5 million into our elections to influence voucher legislation. Some of the biggest names are Americans for Prosperity, American Federation for Children, School Freedom Fund, Tennessee, looking at my notes here, Tennesseans for Student Success. All of those sound great. Yeah, I want to prosper. I want whatever. But when you look at who's funding those programs, it's Jeff Yass, big tech billionaire from Pennsylvania, Betsy DeVos, Charles Koch, Bill Gates, the Walton Foundation, and Michael Bloomberg. And so who they are prioritizing with this education legislation is not parents, students, or teachers. It is these billionaire interests that across the country are trying to privatize and dismantle public education. And so I think as ordinary people, we've got a lot of power to come together and say, no, we don't want that. What we really need are school buildings that are up to date. We need to stop with the punitive testing, and we need school staff that are well supported and paid well. Those are the things that we need to be prioritizing, not what's going to fill your buddy's pocket or totally just dismantle our public schools.
I agree with that. And, I did have a discussion with someone the other day who said, well, where is the money to be made by private schools? And I said, well, the federal government puts a lot of money into public education. And so this is a money grab eventually for that money. I mean, they want to disband the Board of Education or the Department of Education. I think it's a grab for that money. It's much like saying, well, we want to privatize the military. I mean, the military budget's massive. But the education budget is very large as well, federally. And then when you add that to the state and local money, I think these people see that as dollar signs. And they're thinking, wow, let us take control of that. An example in Tennessee of where we've seen that fail horribly, which for some reason our legislators won't admit, is privatizing prisons. I mean, we have seen that happen. That was a money grab. It is a money grab. And it's a horrible, horrible failure to the point that the federal government is coming in and saying, you got to clean this up. And yet we say, oh, well, the answer to that is to give them more money and let them open up more prisons, because clearly putting people in jail is making our crime go down. And I'm being facetious. Well, so we've established the fact that it's not good for all children. And I want my listeners to understand it's because we care about all children. I care about the child who needs a little extra help in school. I care about the community. I care about the people who have taken the time to go to college to get a degree in education. They deserve an ability to make a decent living and have good benefits. And, I care about the school building being a real part of the community in rural areas, which it is. I mean, it's the hub of the community in many cases. So what does the average person do about this, Liv?
Yeah, so I think the average person, all by yourself, you do not have a lot of power to influence legislation. But when you act with your neighbors, you have a lot more power. And then all of a sudden you're acting in your county, and there's counties across the state that are acting too. And then we've got a lot of power when we're working together.
And we've beat it down one time before, right?
Yes. Last year, SOCM and our partners at Tennessee for All, we defeated vouchers because of people power. And so what I want to say before I tell you exactly what to do is that they have purposefully added a lot of bribes to this bill. This special session is tied up with hurricane relief funding to try to leverage what these rural communities in Northeast Tennessee really need. And it's trying to bribe you. They're trying to hold hostage what you really need to pass something for Governor Lee's political gain. So my first advice is don't take the bait. Don't take the bribe. Don't buy it, because vouchers are going to be devastating. The way that you can let them know is, number one, you need to call them. Call your representative and call your senator. Even if you think they won't listen to you, you need to call them and have 5 of your friends also call them and leave a message saying that you want them to vote no on House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1. The next step would be to email them. Send them an email, give them a paper trail. Let them know that you do not support vouchers. And lastly, act locally. If your county commission or school board has not yet made a statement or passed a resolution opposing vouchers, consider signing up for public comment. Give them a call. Ask them if they'll make a public stance, because that's going to give these legislators the political cover that they need to vote no on this when they are otherwise being strong-armed by the governor and the voucher lobby. We've got all of these resources on SOCM's website in our link tree. You can go to SOCM.org or find us on Facebook. We've got a very easy-to-use call script. We've got an email action link, both for your county commission and legislators. And we also host a training every month called our Public School Strong Orientation, where you can learn how to build this movement in your county, and we send you a free t-shirt. So those are ways that I would recommend that you get engaged, because if vouchers failed in the special session, he's going to bring it back up in the regular session. He's wanting to take 2 bites of the apple this go around. And so we need to be vigilant, and we need to be acting now.
Excellent. You all do have a very robust website, and that will be in our show notes for sure. And what Liv is telling us is that, you can get on their website and with just a few clicks, you can get these emails out to everyone on the list that she gave. I also think that another thing, especially in our rural communities, that I would love to see people do is talk about it with all your friends. Bring the topic up. Bring up some of the points that Liv has mentioned to us in this podcast when your friends begin to talk about vouchers. And I do think I would be remiss in not just being very forthright and saying, Governor Lee has tried to sweeten the bill also with a $2,000 one-time payment to teachers. Now, in most counties, I don't know about most counties, but in the county I live in, $2,000 will not pay the rent for a month. That's just almost insulting. Like, we're going to give you $2,000 so that you as a teacher will be in favor of this, but you just get it one time. It's not every year. It's just one time. I mean, that's just a bribe.
Yep. And what they're not advertising with that is in the bill, it says that is even subject to appropriations. So they're going to pass this bill. And then when they decide that they don't have the money for it, there goes your one-time bonus. So teachers don't want it anyway, but they're not even giving you a solid promise on it, which is extra insulting.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to me, also, the whole thing just sort of reeks of a lack of support for our educators. People who, when I was growing up, teachers were just everything. We loved our teachers. Our parents loved our teachers. They were so well respected. And, many, many children wanted to grow up and be a teacher and did become teachers because they had a great teacher. And all of a sudden now we're accusing, Miss Susie, who gets up every day at 5 a.m. to go work the car rider line to greet the children at school. We're accusing her of grooming children to become whatever it is we're supposed to be grooming them to these days. It's sort of, like a war on public education and public educators. And that's very troubling for me. To let it get to that point. Our governor in Tennessee has also, he's really got a three-part deal for the special session. He just threw in under the wire some immigration issues. So I don't really know why he's tying that to the special session. I think he's tying the Hurricane Helene flooding relief to it. But I guess possibly just to say, hey, we're doing this, isn't it a great thing? And oh yeah, vote for this other thing too. But I do think that the local grassroots sort of, I don't want to use the word pressure, but just making your local legislators, your state representatives, and your school board members and your county commissioners aware of how you feel about vouchers and why you feel the way you do about them is really definitely the way to go. So thank you so much for that. Tell us again what the SOCM website is.
Yep. So if you go to SOCM, SOCM.org/public education, you'll find all of our public school strong materials, including our link tree that houses all of these actions on it. And you'll also see information on how to sign up for our next training so that you can get your public school strong shirt and start building this movement in your county. There's also information there if you would like to become an official member of SOCM. It only costs about $20 a year, and that funding, those donations sustain our 5 decades long work of building a better Tennessee, starting locally with ordinary folks. So if you're interested in or inspired by the work that we're doing, we want you to be a part of it and would love to have you.
Fantastic. And on your Facebook page, will you all be keeping us up to date about what's going on in the special session?
Absolutely, yes. So we've got some things in the works that we're hoping to publish more outright during the special session. But yeah, definitely stay glued to our social media and on SOCM's Facebook page. You can already see where we hosted 6 different actions across the state of Tennessee, where hundreds of folks got together to stand up to this voucher scam from Chattanooga to Franklin County to Memphis. Everybody was united in this stopping the scam, and you can hear from our amazing speakers directly about how they feel about it. So I would encourage you to watch those videos on our Facebook.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Liv, for taking time out of what I know is a very busy time. We really appreciate the work you're doing. I have so much admiration for someone who's youthful as yourself, really being involved in all of this and learning about it very deeply so that you can speak not just from emotions, but from facts and figures. And I think that's very, very good. So thank you so much for being on Blue Lift. And I want everyone to know every voice truly does matter. However, if you're not using your voice, no one hears it. And we'll catch you next week.